There are certain meals that kept entire generations alive through the darkest periods of modern history, and then completely vanished. We tend to assume recipes die out because people simply stop liking the taste, but that ignores a much darker reality. Society deliberately chose to erase these foods. When a crisis first hits, the human instinct is to mimic the life you had yesterday. Take the mock apple pie. With real apples completely unavailable during wartime shortages, families crushed up cheap crackers, added sugar, a pinch of cinnamon, and lemon extract. Baked together, the texture and flavor profile mimicked fruit closely enough to trick the mind. Vinegar pie served the exact same psychological function. When actual lemons became impossible to find, a spoonful of apple cider vinegar provided that necessary acidic bite to a sugar base. These substitutions were forced by severe government mandates. Strict rationing programs dictated exactly how many calories civilians could keep. As the stamps ran out, the building blocks of a normal diet, sugar, coffee, evaporated from the market entirely. Baking a pie out of crackers and vinegar is an act of psychological endurance. It provides a brief, fleeting feeling of normalcy to stave off the creeping dread of starvation. But that illusion of normalcy only lasts as long as the sugar does. When a crisis deepens, the priority shifts violently to raw bodily function. This was not food, this was fuel. Enter recipes like creamed chipped beef on toast and cornmeal mush. You take dried, heavily salted meat, bind it in a thick flour gravy, and pour it over a slice of bread. It is dense, it is heavy, and people ate it day after day because it provided an enormous volume of cheap, long-lasting energy. You see this utilitarian approach on an industrial level in the military. Millions consumed these gravy-soaked meals because they scaled effortlessly and kept a working body moving. This chart highlights the biological math of the era. You have a massive caloric deficit required to fight on the front lines, completely offset by the ultra-cheap, highly compressed nutrient density of preserved foods. Brands built empires on this exact math. Spam packed processed pork into a shelf-stable tin, turning it into a dependable staple that survived any climate. Taste is entirely irrelevant here. The ingredients are selected solely to endure the physical toll of a broken world. Eventually, even the cheap ingredients run out, and when families cross the line into absolute poverty, the definition of what counts as a meal gets very dark. This is when water pie appears, using nothing but flavored hot water poured into a crust. Others survived on ketchup soup, boiling a few packets of tomato paste in water just to put something warm in their stomachs. The severity of the crisis is obvious in the environments where these liquids were boiled. When you are cooking over a makeshift outdoor fire in a sprawling shantytown, you use absolutely whatever you can scavenge. Desperation forces bizarre combinations. Thick layers of lard spread across stale bread, mashed potatoes rolled with sugar, bread soaked in leftover bacon fat. When the pantry hit zero, society turned to the dirt. Families picked weeds from the fields, creating dandelion salads, or boiling wild plants into a thin, bitter soup. Which leads us to the final defense against starvation, the everything left stew. There are no instructions. You take the discarded fat, the stale crusts, any root vegetable you can dig out of the ground, and you boil it together in a single pot. Thousands stood for hours to receive a single serving of these mixtures. It is shared misery, bound by a collective effort to survive one day. At this stage, food is stripped at its humanity entirely. It is reduced to raw biological persistence. Then the crisis ends. The depressions lift, the wars conclude, and fresh ingredients flood back into local markets. Within a few short years, those desperate shantytowns are replaced by brightly lit aisles. Grocery shelves are endlessly stocked with meat, fresh fruit, and dairy. But instead of passing down the recipes that kept them alive, the surviving generation actively abandoned them. We didn't lose these foods because they were poorly made. We lost them because they carried the heavy trauma of hunger and fear. No one wanted to eat ketchup soup or water pie ever again. Every bite of cold canned beans was a ghost of a time that society desperately needed to leave in the past. But in burying that pain, we also buried the immense resilience of the people who endured it. We lost the hard-earned knowledge of how to create something out of absolutely nothing. We rely completely on abundance now. But if the shelves went empty tomorrow, would you have the knowledge to survive?